fellow bookworms to Tibra's Den. My name is Whitney, and I have a reading update for you guys. I have two books I'm going to be talking about today. These are both books that have been on my shelf for a very, very long time, and that's one of my main goals this year is to work through some of the books that have just been sitting there. And so first up, we are going to be talking about Ember from the Sun by Mark Cantor. I really, really love this book. I thought it was very well done, and I cannot wait to talk about it more. The other book we're going to be talking about is Demon's Kiss by Maggie Shayne. This one I actually really enjoyed as well. It is not like the greatest book ever written, but I don't know, I found it really, really enjoyable. So we'll talk about that one as well. I'll kind of go over the premise for each book, then I'll go over the CAWPILE ratings, and then I'll get into the depths of each book. I will keep it spoiler light or try to avoid spoilers at all, but I will warn you if I am going into spoiler territory so that way you can skip ahead. Before I get into it though, if you guys could go ahead and give this video a like, it really does help out the channel, and then also go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell notification if you haven't already so you don't miss out on a thing. But let's get into these books. So first up, of course, is Ember from the Sun by Mark Cantor. And this one, the premise is you have Ember, who is born via surrogacy, but her surrogate parents are the ones that raised her. They decided not to give her back, and there's kind of extenuating circumstances though. But they end up keeping her, raising her. Their heritage is Quanu Native American, and so they raise her in that culture, but she is very different from any other human she has met, and she's having like these visions and such, these dreams of people, and her ancestors are kind of calling to her, and so it kind of takes her on a journey to figure out why she is the way she is and kind of learn about her ancestry and everything and save her people. And so yeah, this one, like that said, was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. Demon's Kiss was kind of your typical um, paranormal romance type book, but there's kind of an underlying plot line with one of the characters that I thought was really good, and I can't give that away. But the overall premise is you have Reaper, and he's kind of a lone wolf, and he's hired to take out a gang of rogue vampires. But along the way, he ends up kind of stuck with teammates that he doesn't want, but he ends up needing. And so you have Seth, who is a newbie vampire. You have the princess, who's kind of like this vampire heiress who has, you know, like lots of money and such. You have a healer, and then you also have Vixen, who is a shapeshifter. And so the whole premise is they're trying to kind of take out this of rogue vampires, this gang of rogue vampires, but Reaper kind of has a secret of his own that kind of makes him a danger as well, and that's kind of in the synopsis there, so that's not a spoiler. But yeah, thought that one was pretty enjoyable, though it's not the best written book ever. So as far as CAWPILE rating goes, I'll start with Ember from the Sun. The characters for Ember from the Sun, I gave a 10. I thought the characters were really, really well done. Even like some of the little side characters that are just briefly there were so well done. Like you really got a good sense of who they were, their personalities, and everything like that. Atmosphere, I also gave a 10. I love the atmosphere. It kind of has like this spiritual and cultural thing going on. It's up in Alaska, and then also a little bit in the Seattle area. And yeah, I love the atmosphere, and it kind of flashes back to like way back, which was really cool as well. Writing, I did give a 9, only gave a 9, and that is because it was written in 1996, and some of the bullying in the book is a little bit dated. And so that part of the book didn't age well. But overall, it's actually still very relevant. Like, there's still a lot of issues and such that are relevant today as well. So, still pretty high, but not quite a 10 there. Plot, I gave a 10. I really enjoyed the plot. I enjoyed the premise of it, and I thought it was done, like it kept moving along. I will say though that kind of I thought going in it was going to be more focused on Ember's kind of journey to find out about herself and her ancestors, where it's more focused on her life, and then that's kind of the ending of the book, is that journey itself. But still really good. I enjoyed the plot line. Intrigue, I did only give a 9. There were moments where I was kind of looking like to see how many pages were left. I think it's like 500 and something pages. Yeah, just over 500 pages. So I did kind of like, there was points where I was like, okay, like how many pages do I have left? Like, is it gonna get to the point soon? And so that's why my intrigue dropped down just a little bit. Logic though, I gave a 10. I thought, for being kind of like, it has, I wouldn't consider this sci-fi, but I can see it being considered sci-fi, and it kind of has this fantastical element to it. So um, but it really felt like it made sense. Like you could see it happening. And so that's why I gave Logic a 10. And Enjoyment was definitely a 10. I absolutely love the book. So average rating is 9.71, which is a 5-star rating. As far as Demon's Kiss goes, the characters in this book I only gave a 7. It would have probably been lower than that, but I really liked Vixen. And there's another character that you kind of got more depth to as well. And so you kind of got a good sense of them. But the other characters were kind of generic and a little bit tropey, and so that's why it's not that high, though I did enjoy the characters. Atmosphere, I gave it 8. There's kind of like this spooky type atmosphere, and you have the city, but you kind of have like, I don't know how to describe it, but you have city, but not like the best neighborhoods. And then you also have like out in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know, I just like the atmosphere overall. And it takes place like at night because obviously they're vampires. And so yeah, I really enjoyed the atmosphere. Writing, I gave a 7. There was a lot of toxicity to the relationships in this book, which kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and it wasn't the most amazing writing ever, but it was still really enjoyable. Plot, I gave a 9. I actually enjoyed the plot line of this book. I thought it was pretty straightforward, but then you had that subplot with Reaper, that kind of ties in, and yeah, I kind of enjoyed the plot overall, and so, and I thought it moved along. It was room for more depth for the storyline of the plot, but the plot line itself I thought was pretty solid. Intrigue, I did give it 8. I was pretty intrigued by this book. Like I wanted to know, what was gonna happen. There was some kind of mystery element there that pulled you in and made you wonder a little bit. So pretty solid there. Logic, I also gave it 8. I thought it pretty much made sense. Um, for the most part. There was a little bit of issues here and there, which is obviously why it's not higher. But for the most part, it was pretty straightforward and made sense. And then Enjoyment, I gave a 9. I did overall really enjoy the book, even for all its issues. It's kind of like one of those cheesy romances that you just enjoy, even though it's kind of tropey and not the best written. You just enjoy it anyway. It's kind of how I felt about this book. So average rating on this one was a solid 8, which equals 4 stars. So those are the CAWPILE ratings. Again, the original creators channel is down below if you're interested in learning more about the CAWPILE rating system. But let's go ahead and get a little deeper into these books. So Ember from the Sun, this one, I mentioned that like the bullying aspects are a little bit dated, but other than that, a lot of the elements in this book are still very, very relevant today. There's kind of this cultural element and the loss of cultural culture, which is very relevant to what the Native Americans faced and still face to this day. They don't, pieces of their culture have been lost, and this book captures that very, very well. There's also kind of this aspect of kind of them being threatened by progress as well. I'm trying to not give too much away, but again, that's very relevant to what's going on, and kind of modern progress threatening, not only their culture and their ties to the land, but also health and such as well. And so that ties in to this book very, very well. And this would be a great book to read and discuss, I think. And I also thought that the author did really, really well capturing, like, and creating this culture, this Native American culture, but not doing it in a disrespectful way, if that makes sense. Like, he, I think, took inspiration, but he created a whole new culture and tribe and such for the book instead of using an existing tribe and trying to capture their culture. He took inspiration, I think, but he created something new, which I thought was done well as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed that aspect of the book. And it kind of also brings into the question, you know, which again and again I kept thinking is what's okay in the name of science, and what's okay in the name of progress as well. And you see that it's kind of a recurring theme throughout this book, which I love because I often wonder that, like, especially reading different books and then in real life too, like, yes, science has a very important place, but I think there's kind of this moral line that sometimes gets crossed when it comes to science, and I thought this book captured it very, very well. And so there's a lot kind of going on in this book, more than just Ember and who her ancestors are and trying to save her people. There's a lot more to it because you have that science aspect, and you have this cultural aspect, and I loved how he captured like the spirituality. There's kind of this shaman. I I can't pronounce the word. I'm sure I wasn't pronouncing it right in my head, but there's kind of like this old man shaman, and he's kind of the storyteller. And it was just the spiritual nature of the book was so cool, and I absolutely loved it. But like I said, there's that bullying aspect that was very dated, and so for example, they used the R word because Ember, as a child, struggles to speak for a reason, which you'll know if you read the book. And so, she gets teased because of that and called the R word. Um, and even how her speech therapist kind of handled that, she didn't, there was no outrage or anything like that. It's just like, well, no, you're not. Like, you know, and I don't know. I don't know how to explain it without giving too much away. So yeah, she gets teased because of that, and then also because she looks a little bit different and such. And then she's golden, and so they use the N word but replaced with a G. Um, so that kind of bullying aspect, and I think obviously this was written in '96, but I think for the time it was written, people didn't call out others. Like, it still wasn't okay then to use those types of words, but people didn't call it out like they do nowadays. And so that's where the book kind of gets a little bit dated. But at the same time, it also, that cruelty and how she's treated also is very relevant, and we still see derogatory terms and such used against people today. It's just called out more. So even though it's a bit dated, it does fit as well for the book itself. So, but yeah, I thought it was really cool how the author did it. And like I said, when I was going into it, I thought the bulk of the book was going to be Ember on her journey to find out why she's having these dreams and kind of her history and such. But it really is her life. And so it starts off before she's even born or before she's even implanted or anything like that. And it starts off in the beginning. And one of the main characters, he is a scientist, and so he's in Seattle and he has left his homeland, and he goes back to visit, and they're hunting, and he has lost that connection to his culture. And you have his sister who's trying to learn everything she can about the old ways and such so she can keep that culture alive. And so you have this dynamic, and you have like these two people who went very separate ways. One went for towards the modern and progress, and one is trying to hold on to the old ways and the culture. And it's just, I mean, I just love how it was done. And so yeah, you have that, and it starts off with him, and then it goes through Ember's life and kind of the struggle she's had throughout her life. There's also a deaf character in the book, which I thought was done really well, and I like that representation. And so you have her, and you have Ember and her family, and then it goes on, to her journey. And I loved because there's kind of this other guy that comes in, and you're like, well, where did he come from? And what's the point of this? But it actually ends up tying in to the main plot as well. And like, so there's a lot of questions about what's okay in the name of science and in the name of progress, and losing cultural aspects, and how important it is to hang on to those. And so I thought the book was really well done, and I would definitely encourage. And I think, like I said, this is a great one for discussions, and I might actually use it as kind of a book of the month in the future and come up with discussion questions and such. But you can see I marked it all up. I put stars on some of my favorite parts. There's a whole section right in the middle where you have that old shaman, and he's kind of telling like old stories and such. And it kind of has that mythological element. Like, I cannot sing enough praises for this book. I absolutely loved it. But let's go ahead and move on to Demon's Kiss, because I don't think I can say anything more about Ember from the Sun without giving anything away, and I definitely don't want to. So, like I said, this may be one that I do discussion questions on and such in the future, because I absolutely loved it and I would love to talk more, but it's really one I don't want to spoil for others. So, but now let's go ahead and talk about Demon's Kiss by Maggie Shayne. So again, this one you have Reaper, and you have multiple main characters. Like, yes, it starts off with Reaper, but it really kind of goes evenly between the others. And I didn't realize this was part of a series. This is like the 13th book in the series. I can't remember the name, so I'll put it down here, of the series itself. But this is like the 13th book, and so I was like, oh shoot, did I miss something? And so I was kind of looking back and reading the synopsis from the others, and this one really probably should have been the start of a new series, I think. Um, because based on what, I didn't go back too far, but I was just kind of going back. And I really didn't see anything that tied into this book itself. But the next book in the series ties into this one. Um, so I'm definitely planning on at least getting the next book. I don't know if I'll go back to the beginning or not, but I would like to read more of this author. But basically, you have this group, like I said, and it is a paranormal romance, so it is very heavy on the romance. And so you have Seth and Vixen, who are romantic interests. You have um, the princess, Topaz, and she's had her heart broken. And so they kind of still have this relationship too, um, which again, very toxic, but it's there. And then you have Reaper, and there's a vampire that's part of the road group that's kind of his romantic interest. And then you have another character, the healer, and she doesn't really have a romantic interest. So this is kind of sad because she was one of my favorite characters. I thought out of all the characters, Vixen and the healer had the most depth to them. Um, and I really enjoyed those characters, and I definitely hope to see more of them in the future. But so yeah, you have Reaper and this gang, and he's, like I said, a lone wolf, so he's really kind of reluctant to bring them in, and that's because of a secret of his, which, like I said, is mentioned in the synopsis, that he's kind of dangerous and might kill them all, and you really don't know what that is, and she's kind of cryptic about it in the book too, and he doesn't want to reveal his secret to the others fully, and it ends up actually being Roxy who tells them. And overall, very classic tropes for like vampires, especially paranormal romance and such. But I like some of the twists she did on this. Like, one of my favorites is that vampires in this book, that they can get injured and such, but they heal with the sun. So even though they can't go out in the sun, they heal with the sleep that comes with the sun. And I thought that was kind of a cool little twist. I had never seen anybody present it quite in that way. And I thought that was pretty cool because normally you just see them, oh, they heal so quickly and such. Which no, they can get hurt, but with the sun, they're kind of rejuvenated. Um, uh, with the sleep that comes with the sun because they can't go out in the sun. So I thought that was pretty cool as well. Um, and then you you had this kind of other aspect. You had the shapeshifter, which kind of the twist she took there I thought was interesting as well, and how that kind of tied in to the vampires, which was pretty cool. But like I said, there were a lot of toxic relationships. Reaper's relationship with Briar, who was part of the road gang, very, very toxic. And he's kind of the good guy, but he does something that is basically assault. And yeah, I just didn't like that whole aspect. And then there's kind of like this controlling nature to Seth, but Vixen calls him out on that, which is great. But then kind of how he responds to kind of her secret was a little bit toxic. And then the whole relationship between Topaz and Jack, like that's a whole nother can of worms. And like I get you kind of have this attraction, and I understand like vampires are supposed to feel everything more intensely and such, but it's like you still have a brain though, and you need to use it. So that whole situation, which you would have to read it to know what I'm talking about, but just the dynamics of the relationships were very problematic. Um, and not okay. But the story itself and the plot line I thought was really good. Like I said, Reaper kind of being called in to take out these rogues, and then there's something kind of more to that as well that he doesn't know about. And it kind of ties into his secret and what's going on with him as well. And so I really don't felt like they fully the author fully went into that. She took a piece of a bigger plot to make this book. And so, like I said, it is part of a series. So I'm hoping that maybe that will come back around, or maybe if I look back at the previous books, there is something in there that relates to this because I want to know more. And it does make sense to be part of a series, but then, like I said, looking at some of this other synopsis, you have completely different characters that have nothing to do with this. So I'm a little confused by it. I'm definitely going to have to do a little bit more research. If you've ever read the series, definitely let me know. If like Reaper's history is brought up more in previous books or if it continues on in the coming books because I'm kind of curious. But it seems like these books might have some like loose ties, but maybe are easily read as standalones. Like I said, the only synopsis I read that seemed to tie into this one was the next one in the series. So I'm a little confused by that, but definitely let me know if you have read Demon's Kiss or the rest of the series, kind of what the deal is there. And I'll definitely be doing more research on my own because, like I said, I'm definitely interested in at least reading the next book, but I just felt like you only got a little portion of the story and there's a lot more to it. So I want more for sure. Like I said, it wasn't the greatest written book ever or anything like that. It was kind of tropey, and the relationships were kind of toxic, but they have this intense attraction to each other, which again is kind of more romance. And sometimes with the paranormal, you have that darker side. So yeah, I don't really know what I think about that, but the story itself and the plot line I did enjoy, and they're kind of trying to figure out how to get past, the defenses and then this deeper secret and what it means and everything like that. I thought it was really, really enjoyable. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I think I've kind of rambled on enough. I tend to do that. But definitely let me know if you've read either of these or if you think you might. I strongly encourage Ember from the Sun. I thought this was really well done, but I encourage it, like I said, if you can read it with somebody, buddy read it with them or as a group and do discussions. I think this book is perfect for that. And this one, if you just like a little paranormal romance in your life, I thought this was a solid read, even though there were some issues with it as well. But anyway, I'll leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.